Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ted from Adventures to Die For, talking to you more about behind the DM screen. This is the videos that I'm going to put out every week to explain to people what I was thinking at the time. They're normally going to be about 10 to 15 minutes long. Sometimes, if there's a lot of action or a lot of things that I had to think of, they might be about 20 minutes long or so. Please, if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and consider going ahead and following us on Twitch so you can watch the action live every week. That being said, I wrote a few notes down and I wanted to show people and explain to people what I was thinking about as a DM during specific moments, especially moments that I needed to make sure as a DM that the pacing was good, the action was good, and everything overall was as good as it could be. If you have any questions about what I was thinking, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments, and I'll definitely react appropriately and explain them to you appropriately. The first thing is around 16 minutes and 15 seconds.
It's just they just
So
don't
the
get it.
pacing was a
I don't know.
little
We was
off
trying
for
to
me.
call him
At this
personality.
point, the players
Oh,
are
really? I just,
considering
sometimes you just gotta take a chance.
considering a few things
Look, I
as
took a
to
chance and I
what they're
found new
doing
people. You
and what
see
they're
how the
planning
game
on
works?
doing. And
That
from here,
that's
you could
true.
see
I agree with taking chances.
that I am actually grabbing the barkeep and then I'm bringing him into the action so that the players themselves can go ahead
I don't got time for
and
all that.
I know,
understand what's
but
going on
you
and give
just
them a
gotta
really good
balance
role
it.
play
You
moment.
just need to
That being said,
reel it back in.
All right, I apologize.
and then I
I won't
prep
try
it.
not to be a jerk no
I
more.
prep it for after they're done
No,
speaking.
you're not being a jerk at all. It's just
I don't even have any here.
You start hearing somebody go up the stairs. They're kind of hitting their boom, 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 boom up the stairs. And the bartender is coming up the stairs. Hey, weren't you kids going to the bathhouse tonight?
That's right, Mr. Goodell.
Well,
Yeah, we going there. Yeah.
why don't you hop to it and you can clean some more?
Oh, is the door open? Is it? It's
So that was done. That was done to go ahead and evoke some emotional response from some of the players as well, especially because of the situation. The players themselves are essentially in a bathhouse situation where they are having to clean a bathhouse to stay in the Goblinfell Tavern, and one of the players in particular is very annoyed at that. We're going to shift over to 2213,
and then this one
which is the
goes.
chat of the tieflings.
Sure, we'll help you. What do you need help with?
So naturally in this area, the region,
When
in
they
this
arrive, they
particular
need
region,
help.
everyone has an ulterior motive as to why they would help. They're very easy about giving the information because tieflings uh, have an ulterior motive, and honestly, the players hopefully will have written down deceit and brawn because they may see them in the future. They may not even be tieflings, but it was to add a few extra characters in that could be plot characters and really useful in regards to everything. Well, there's only one place it's So in 2015, I don't know if you noticed while you were watching, but I actually moved the NPCs. Uh, the reason why is because you're trying to create an environment for the players themselves. Like they need to know and feel like they are in a living, breathing tavern. The NPCs themselves, I imagine them going up to the bar and asking for a drink. I imagine them, moving around, sitting in different tables, trying to relax, trying to do as best they can for what they're doing. This is something that I've picked up, and honestly, I've never seen a DM do this on a regular basis. It is a little bit more work, but it allows the players to kind of be like, "Wow, like this is actually a tavern that's living and moving around, and it's awesome." So we're gonna shift to 33. So you may recognize this bathhouse from the Dungeon of the Dead 3. It's part of the Baldur's Gate Descent to Avernus campaign. I did borrow this dungeon itself for the ease of the dungeon use, as well as the most of the players haven't experienced a dungeon yet. But much of the background info and lore behind the bathhouse have been completely removed. The players know the bathhouse as being basically attached behind the Goblinfell Tavern. And during this period, I allowed another roleplay moment with a goblin, and it went fairly well. Um, we have a goblin go ahead and go into the pool, and they go through a roleplay moment, and they go through the entirety to make sure that the goblin just doesn't care where they're going or what they're up to. They promise the goblin a massage on the way back. We're gonna shift to 4733. So the party starts to really dig deep into the dungeon and starts to explore. Tarek looks around. The players are fairly cautious. I explain essentially the rules of the dungeon without saying it in a way so the players can understand the issues if the dungeon goes awry.
Kind of poking around as I walk down here
And I'll show you how I said it.
and being stealthy as possible.
All right, roll a stealth check for me. Very stealthy as you walk through.
All right, I'm kind of like looking my head around the corner a little bit. All right. So seeing that the corridor, I guess, are those steps going down or up?
Those are steps going down. Some things you do notice personally. So here it is. You notice that the ceilings seem to be about 8 feet high, just from kind of inspecting the roof, and just from inspecting the hallway itself. And the whole area seems to be braced with wooden beams. You're kind of worried if something were to happen to any of the wooden beams. But yeah, everything seems to be braced in this area, in this kind of dungeon of sorts with wooden beams. So the reason why I said that to the players is because by saying that to the players and explaining to them kind of the rules of the dungeon itself, they now understand, and they have the understanding of, okay, so there are beams of wood that are rotted out that are setting foot in this dungeon. Everywhere in the dungeon, there's these wooden beams. If something happens, something happens. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, that's what we're dealing with. At 50 seconds, I actually had a major DM choice decision that I had to make, and it was pretty important.
Okay. The god wants he takes I don't know if he's to use his tools, but he takes a look at the wooden construction. And I guess I can do an investigation of the carpentry to sort of see how decrepit or not these things are.
Sure. So the player Tyler has.
And Tarek just says, yeah, from what he's seen, it looks like if you were to damage some of that, it probably would not be in our best interest.
So the player that Tyler has is a person named Degas. Degas has a way to kind of look at things and is used to carpentry tools and used to what he's doing with them. It really doesn't take Degas too much time or understanding to know that the wood seems to be soft and rotting. So it's just really not something that you really hope has any damage taken to it in the future. So the player wanted to make a decision and be able to fix the beams of wood that are holding the dungeon up. Now, there are some pros and cons to saying yes or no to this. Saying no is saying no to a player, and sometimes players really do not like being told, no, you cannot do this. That being said, imagine, if you will, a dungeon that instead of the players just walking through it, all of the players instead not just walk through it, but fix it as they go to prevent any issues from being had. It would have taken hours upon hours and checks upon checks, and players don't really want to have to sit through all of that. So that was my line. I decided that, and I explained that the choice I made was no, even with magic, it wouldn't have made any sense at all to allow the beams to essentially affix themselves to the roof and fix themselves with mend or anything else. You can let me know in the comments whether or not that was what you think the right decision is, but that was my decision just based off of that moment. Um, I try to allow my players to do as much as they can, but it was that moment that I really had to put my foot down, especially because I just think it would have taken way too much time to go ahead and do anything like that. All right. At 5840, I made a huge mistake, and I can't really fix it. Uh, don't make the mistake and wrap your dynamic lighting and ignore secret areas because it forces players to need you to force them through a secret panel and make up an excuse as to why
He
later.
just kind
I
of
made a huge
and
I made a
is
huge
this part of
accidental decision, and I wrapped my dynamic lighting all the way around everything, so everything is attached. So I can't just disconnect a piece of dynamic lighting, which counts as one solid line. It would destroy the entire dungeon as I did the dynamic lighting. So don't make the mistake that I did. Make sure you take a look at your map as far as secret passages and break your dynamic lighting appropriately. Because if you don't, you're left kind of having to explain why you have to push them through the wall. 125, 125.50.
Okay. Like I'll do sort of like, you know, look.
And does nothing. As it tries to move it, it barely budges it just based off of how heavy it is. So this was an interesting
Okay.
situation. So in 125.50, we had a player try to use their mage hand to trigger like a bad thing to happen that was behind this banner that was definitely over 10 pounds. It's been soaked in water. It's barely clinging to the ceiling. And when I run into circumstances like this, I always consider going by the book. Assuming I let the player do more than intended, you start to set weird precedents about using spells in weird ways, not intended to get around dangerous situations. And honestly, I think it makes it so that you are neutering parts of your party that could think of different ways to do that. A lot of people try to use Mage Hand in very weird ways in order to get around certain things, setting off traps when you're not really supposed to, trying to things like that. And there are very clear cut rules as written things in regards to that. So what happened? Spoiler: Tarek went ahead and touched behind there. He got poisoned. He had a periapta poison on. It didn't affect him. And yeah,
Like I'll do
so we'll
sort of
shift over
like,
back to
yeah.
129.
Gone forever.
Well, so at 129, Tarek rolls for the poison, and a player gave him a inspiration die that he's been holding on to for weeks. He fails, and
You're gonna
he
take
gets
13
poisoned.
points of poison damage, and you are poisoned for 1 minute.
Now, for the full minute, it's
Don't we
that
have
many rounds.
don't we have a poison?
So I think it's supposed to be 5 or 10 rounds
I
for a
am
minute.
immune to all poison and poison effects.
So instead of
All
telling
right, so
Tarek,
you're immune, and while you're poisoned, all the poison damage you would take for each turn, which would have been, let's see.
so
If you
instead
want,
of telling
if you're
Tarek,
curious how much
damn
damage you were gonna take,
you, why don't you just die?
it would have been a total of
Wow.
59 damage over the course of 10 turns.
So I let the players react and understand how bad that trap could have been for them because there's no way for them to cure the poison and there's no way for them to deal with something like that. So it explains to them how dangerous the dungeon is. You this is like impact versus passiveness. Like a player beating a trap a DM provides should be a good experience for players. So if there's a tremendously dangerous trap that a player dodges, you can roll the damage die and show them how much damage they probably would have taken otherwise, especially if it's very dangerous. So the players can react to that and understand appropriately that they dodged themselves out of a really crazy situation. At 141,
Why we are.
there was a great
Why
role
don't
playing
you come
session
over
while
here and
NPCs
pray
tried to
with
convince the
us?
players to come up
I'm a
and be
follower from Naboo.
sacrificed. The players didn't take the bait. It developed into a combat scene, and they
good.
successfully killed the NPCs. Pretty cool stuff.
Come over and pray with us.
I can't. I have to escort.
211,
1 second.
we have the rotting egg smell.
And
So this is a
how
way
is
to tell
that?
my players to make a check to see if they recognize
You're
what it could be.
smelling something really strange.
Unfortunately for them,
Basically,
they
like
don't attempt to
Iuris smell with
investigate it,
them.
and they close the door behind them, signaling to me a 60-second count until the bad thing happens in the room, and then they leave the room before the
Kind of
60
almost
seconds
used
is
to it
up.
by now, based on all the stuff that you've eaten that tasted like bile and other excrement.
221. The Necromancer knows Fireball. It casts the Fireball in order to soften the team up and get them into a situation where they don't feel like they can stay safe. Now, I allow Tarek to do a surprise attack because he made a pretty daring attack. He pretty much jumps over, a pack of rats to go ahead and make the attack itself.
Oh, I took
Now,
the boots and I rushed.
when he did that, instead of punishing him with
I
reactions,
rushed forward and
I made a
I'll,
decision that the
I'll
rats
attack
wouldn't
her
be
with
ready
the
to react to
remaining.
him, which
Okay.
pretty
As
much
you
makes
do
sense to
that,
me.
when you get to her,
And then from there, he disengaged,
she's
and then we
going
went to
to
combat.
cast her spell.
A player had a very timely counterspell, which is great, and the rats had a secondary function because they had such a low to hit. I think it was either +3 or +5. That if they succeeded in hitting the same person 3 times, they gave a point of exhaustion. That was something that was added as me as the DM because I felt that just giving poison doesn't make a lot of sense, and luckily that never happened. So no players had to deal with the exhaustion point.
Butterflies in there.
Wait,
So at 3-2, the players
listen.
found a rat that
Looking at
never
this,
attacked them, but the players don't know when he talked to animal spell or anything like that, and the rat itself
I
just
can
kind of
hear you.
turns into an icicle and implodes due to the damage from the ice
Uh,
bolt. If they
this
were able to
sound really
talk to
cute.
it, they could have found some info as to where it walks to. Pretty much part of the
I
normal
just,
dungeon stuff, but just doesn't
I just
happen.
attacked.
Um,
All right.
we skip over to 311.
It seems to be
And
a
Jabu searches the tomb, and a trap
weapon of
triggers,
some
in which I
kind.
describe
It
that it is a
seems to be a
spiritual weapon.
spiritual weapon
The
made out of
players
wood,
seem
very similar
confused and
to a
maybe
battle
bewildered as to
axe.
what it could be,
It
so almost all
immediately
of them
attempts to attack you.
attack it, but missing because it's a spiritual weapon. But Jabu finally dispels it. They find nothing but a dead end and we
Miserably
move on.
misses.
No real crazy issues here. I had to make sure that the weapon itself basically
You
kept
all
giving
can
them hints that it
decide to
was a spiritual
do
weapon.
one action, and then it is going to go again.
So then we go to 318.
It's there.
And this is the rotten egg smell. So I play a fireball sound.
What's going on? I can't see anything. Oh.
And then because of how Roll20 works and the specialized system of Roll20, if you pay for the subscription, you can make different things kind of appear, like those animations. So I made the fire animations appear in front of the players. And what happens is that I give a full explanation to the players. There's a cave in, there's an explosion because Degas had a torch in his hand that was lit as he walked into the room and got close enough to the rotten egg smell. All the players make a dexterity check, and then afterwards, instead of punishing them by making them have issues with resting, I go ahead and allow them to rest in another room. The reason why is because they were pretty devastated. You have to gauge the players and the party and their HP just as much as they have to gauge their HP in the party. So you have to be smart about it. I rolled a percentile when they were in the other room, But anything less than 10%, I would have added an enemy, but there was nothing less than 10%.
Everyone is going to take 13 damage. However, the god takes half.
So 335, they actually find an assassin disguised. And she would have slowly followed the party until she was dispatched. It's the same assassin in the Dungeon of the Dead 3 that normally is behind the bloody casket. But the reason why I didn't have her there is because I wanted the players to kind of move further, move on, because it was getting a bit timely as far as the dungeon. I usually like all dungeons to be done around 3 to 4 hours, and we were almost at our 4-hour mark at this point. So the players attempt to look through her disguise, and the player even gives her a potion, but she turns on them as most of them go through the secret passage. In her mind, they will die from the monsters ahead anyway, so they have no worries about showing them to their doom. So she opens the secret passage for them and basically tries to kill a straggler along the way, which is pretty crazy. When this happens, Thorka, not realizing how smart his play was, pretty much waited for her to come back from being invisible while cornering her and charging her, laying her out one blow. Beacon was tremendously lucky, dodging the assassin 4 total attacks. This was kind of a really great moment for the players and for Thorka. And honestly, if you ever run into a situation where players outsmart an NPC, let them do it. Like, overall, they felt great doing it. It's a great moment for them because you're trying to create a living, breathing world. The NPCs themselves are not, like, they know as much information as they would know sitting in that corner waiting for them. So her moves were attack, attack, turn invisible. So because of where she was cornered during the round, there was nothing that they could do from there. And then finally at 353, so they try to sneakily move up, and they really have a hard time with their stealth checks. So the players in my game, I go ahead and turn on the boss music at one point, and they recognize it. And we end our sessions at 10:30, and I wanted to give our players the opportunity to end on a high note, which this is the boss music.
As I'm walking
runs
through,
out.
I say, everybody, shh, be quiet. You're too loud.
I think I heard you.
So this amps them up.
And it roars. This murderous cry.
And now they're really nervous.
You're not sure what it is, but it looks very menacing, and it looks hungry.
Doesn't look friendly at all, does it?
No. And from there, it starts to charge. And that is where we're going to end our session today.
Oh.
Whoa.
So the reason why we do that is because the players now can talk amongst themselves in the out-of-game chat and the Discord prior, so they could strategize without having to do so in-game during the fight. It's kind of the best of both worlds, because now, as a DM, you don't have to give them any sort of criticism for kind of strategizing in between. And at the same time, you can be really understanding in a situation where you can go all out as a DM and not feel like the players didn't take every opportunity to do the best they can. So this is kind of the strategies that I have as a DM. It's not always the best for everybody, but that's what I have. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask me directly. You can go ahead and PM me on Twitch, twitch.tv/thetedster, or you can go ahead and comment down below, and I will go ahead and respond to that as well. Thank you very much. This was a little bit longer than expected. There was a lot that happened this session. Give me a shout if you have any questions, and don't hesitate to watch live during the next session on Wednesday, every Wednesday at 6:30. Thank you very much. Have fun.